Hi guys, I'm Mommy Bear to Many. I am mom to 14 children. 12 of those children are still at home, and today we are going to do 3 soups that are very budget friendly and I'm sure your family will enjoy. I hope they do because mine really enjoy these 3 soups. So let's get at it. Good morning guys. This morning we are going to make 3 soups. In this first soup, I am just chopping the onion to make cream of broccoli soup. The way that we do it is very affordable. So I'm just going to chop 2 of these huge onions that I got from Sam's Club and put those in the pot. These things were huge. They were like the size of softballs. It was kind of crazy. Then I'm going to take a huge bag from Sam's Club. That's 4 pounds. These are put into 4 individual bags, each one being a pound. I'm going to use all 4 of these bags. So I'm just going to open these up and dump them right in that pot. We have 2 sticks of butter as well going in here. You could use coconut oil, you could use lard, you can use bacon fat, whatever you feel the best for you and your family. We really enjoy the butter in this dish specifically. You do not need to cut the broccoli up at this point because later on we are going to actually take an immersion blender and just chop it all up like that. It saves time, it saves energy, and yeah, who wants to cut frozen broccoli? So I'm dumping all 4 bags into here. And then we are going to put this on the stove. So lit the stove, have the butter go in there, gonna cover it over. And this is what it looks like when we are done. So it's nice and tender. And I am just going to add some broth now. So in this, with the 4 bags, I ended up adding enough broth to almost cover it. It was 3 quarts, I believe it was, that I ended up using. So I see how high I end up having that in there. Yes, it's 3 quarts. You want it high enough to cover all of your broccoli, and then I'm taking an immersion blender and I am just going to take a little while. It probably took like 10 minutes altogether chopping this up. Sometimes you have to take the immersion blender and like put it right on top of a piece of broccoli or whatever and just chomp away. I have it plugged in and it is still on low while I'm doing this. You can turn it off. It doesn't really matter either way, however you want to do it. The chicken broth is the broth that we make ourselves, which has so much nutritional value in it. So now you can see here that it's pretty much all chopped up. I'm just double checking for any pieces that might be stuck there in the bottom. And then here I am going to add some, it's Xanax gum. You can use arrowroot powder. You can use cornstarch. You could use regular flour. If you're using cornstarch, regular flour, or arrowroot powder, I would really highly recommend adding that before you're adding your broth. But with the Xanax gum, it's better to add it at the end like this. And then we just topped that with cheese. Actually, I didn't show it, but we topped it with a little bit of cream and then cheese. So now we're going to do a different recipe and we're going to chop those onions again. We're going to do butternut squash soup this time. And I am just, this is one of our favorites. I actually canned a bunch of butternut squash soup. Not this past year, but the year before. We had like an plethora of butternut squash, and I ended up canning a bunch of it. This year we had enough. We ended up this was our last batch that I made with our fresh butternut squash, but you can use this with canned as well. So I am going to chop up the onions. I was cutting them small, but you don't really need to cut them small. I don't know. I just was in like the mindset of, oh, I'm going to cut these small. But you don't really need to because you're going to end up, again, using the immersion blender. That is like my best friend in the kitchen when it comes to soups. So I am adding the onions to, I had somebody else doing some butternut squash. That's why it's already in the pot. Doing the onions in there. So, yeah. Now I'm going to grab all these peppers and just chop them roughly. I mean, they can just be in really big hunks. It doesn't have to be perfect. They can just be like hunked. As long as like the seeds and stuff are removed, then you are all set. The peppers really give it a nice flavor. If you do not have peppers, another option is to do like onions and bacon is really good. That gives it a nice thing. Or you can do like a sausage, like stir fry the sausage and onions together and then do it. But if you don't want to do with bacon or sausage, I find that the peppers just give it a really nice flavor. So we grew quite a bit of butternut squash. Is probably one of our favorites. So we grew quite a bit of butternut squash. They're so like hardy. So we still have some. Last year we had butternut squash all the way until like April that were still good. So sometimes if they're touching each other especially, then they might go bad. And that's just having them on a shelf like in my kitchen. That's not like root cellar or anything like that. They just last a really long time. So I love to grow tons of butternut squash. You can also can it. I can it as I would pumpkin. I'm going to add some coconut oil to this one. You could also add butter. You can it just like you would can pumpkin, which is in chunks and not as a puree. It is not recommended by the USDA, just so you guys are aware of that. But people have been doing that for a really long time. So we chunk it and can it. All right, so this is sauteed all in there, and we're just going to wait until those butternut squash are nice and tender. So I'm adding my seasonings in here about halfway through cooking. I am doing black pepper. If I were to guess, I'd say 2 tablespoons. I tend to eyeball things, and that probably drives my children crazy. And the same with salt. I'm in a really big pot there, and I have a bunch of butternut squash. I think I had a total of like 8 butternut squash, various sizes, big and small. So salt, pepper, and then I'm also going to use some red pepper in this, which just gives it has to be like what your family likes. So that is about 1.5 tablespoons of red pepper. And that is what our family likes. It doesn't make it too hot. If I do any more, then it's too hot for the kids. It's a really nice flavor. So now I'm dumping in broth. I did not measure the broth in this recipe because I was making the turkey soup the same day. So I just used some of the broth from that. So you can see about how high up it gets. So you can see some vegetables like on top still. Now this is all cooked down now that we put the broth in, and I am just using the immersion blender. I ground it all up, and now I'm adding about 1/2 gallon of milk. You could also add almond milk to make this dairy-free, or you could use heavy cream or a combination of either of those. This is something that Sweet Pea doesn't enjoy, so we're not thinking about if it needs to be low carb or not. Almond milk would make it a lot lower carb than just regular milk if you're trying to do that. But butternut squash is kind of a higher carb vegetable, so you just have to do the math and stuff on that. But she does not like butternut squash soup, or else I would do that. So this is so yummy. I mean, things don't keep justice. I just took some of the chicken from this pot and put it into here. I'm going to wait for it to cool down a little bit, and then I'll be picking the chicken off of the bones. I got this pot that has turkey and broth, and then this one that's got strained into broth. So I'm using this big pot. Now, this is not dirty. I just took like the broth and carcass and that type of stuff out. So I'm going to use the same thing without washing it to make a big pot of soup. Okay, so I'm just going to dump this chicken and broth. Now that already had a bunch of chicken in it and some broth. And then I'm going to strain other one. And I'm going to throw this broth in here. This broth is gorgeous. I leave all the fats and stuff in the broth. I want all the goodness in there. And then I have a bowl as well that I started to, and this is actually gelatinous at this point. All right, now let me get some other ingredients. So now I have 9 quarts of vegetables I'm gonna put in there. Beautiful seal. This is cabbage. So I have 2 cabbage. I dump the broth and everything in there because there's nutrition in that, or the liquid around it when I'm doing soup. And then I'm going to add some carrots. These were all canned last year. You could cut veggies and stuff and cook all that down. That would be fine too. I'm just trying to do this real quick, to be honest with you. And I'm using up these jars, which is absolutely perfect. And this is how easy, if you had canned meat, this is how easy it would be to throw a soup together. Sprinkle in green beans. So I have 2 green beans. You can put whatever veggies you want in there, and as much or as little as you want to stretch it. I don't can a lot of soups because I like to just throw the ingredients in. Like if I have the canned meat, then I can make a big pot of soup. But chicken is one that I can can because it is good if somebody is sick, but it's also good if my husband really likes that, and he could just warm it up for supper, lunch, whatever he's gonna have that day at work. So this is where we're at with this. Which is perfect because then you'd be able to warm it up and throw some rice or throw some noodles in here. So what I'm going to do is warm this up, and then I'm going to can some of that.